Good afternoon, everybody. Uneducated Economist here. So one of the biggest topics of discussion that you find out there is the inequality that is taking place within the economies, the wealth divide, that wedge driven between the rich and the poor. And it seems to be growing ever more present and ever more impactful on the daily lives of the American people, especially, those who are working hard at a daily job, working 9 to 5, trying to figure out how to make those ends meet. They look out there and they say, there was a time in our lives that we used to be able to have a regular job and it was enough to buy a house and a car and have the family and vacations, retirement, all the stuff that people would have dreamed of as being the American dream seems to be getting harder and harder to acquire. And people look at the government or the rich corporations, the bankers, they say, hey, you're the reasons, you're the blame for all this. And so when I think about what it is that's creating this major wealth divide that is happening here, with not only in the United States, but other Western economies as well, it really comes down to the decisions that the people have made themselves. It doesn't really have the government to blame, although you could blame the government, and you can blame the bankers because there's plenty of blame to go around, and there's certainly evidence of it happening within the corporations. But when we really think about what it is that's going on within the economies that creates this major wealth divide, it comes down to the decisions that the people have made themselves. Like, when you think about what it is that separates the rich from the poor, it's property owners and capitalists and then everybody else. See, property owners and capitalists are the ones who really truly live independently of the state. The property owners will collect rent. They have, ownership in the asset that is most popular out there for people to try and acquire. And when you think about the capitalists out there, they're the ones who are lending into the system who are getting a return off of it. This is the only two positions that I can think of or that I can find studying history that will put you on the other side of the wedge: property ownership and capitalists. Now, what holds people back from being a property owner? Well, there's lots of things that are taking place within the economy, considering some of the things like interest rate settings and government interference with subsidies, or even like issues with permitting issues and not allowing the regulations to be free-flowing for people to go out there and just build properties and have those properties in their own possessions. There's a lot of excuses that can be used there. But then there's also the capitalists out there who are lending into this system who are getting a return. See, when you think about it, when it comes to being a property owner or a capitalist, you don't necessarily have to be a true property owner, meaning like this property, this house is in my possession. There's many ways that you can be part of the real estate game without actually having taken true possession of the property itself and being like a landlord. There's real estate investment trusts, for example. You can group up with other people to buy property, so you're not the only one who is responsible for it, but you have your responsibility within it. There's a lot of ways that you can step into the idea of being a property owner that isn't necessarily having to dump every single dime that you have in order to acquire a piece of property, with the idea that if I have property, I can get on the other side of the wedge. The other way of going about it is to be the capitalist, taking your money, your hard-earned money, and then putting it towards something that is going to have a return to it. Dividend-paying stocks, businesses, even stocks or even bonds that are available to you right now, gives you the ability to be the capitalist who has a return on your capital investments. These are the only two positions that I can think of that are going to get you on the other side of the wedge. Now, what ends up happening with most people is that they don't position themselves in this fashion, but what they do position themselves in is luxuries. They will buy nicer clothes, they will buy a nicer apartment or try to rent a nicer apartment, they will buy nice cars. And I think the nice cars is probably what's driving their inequality. Like literally, they are driving their own inequality. Every single month, you have to think, how much do you make in interest payments, insurance payments, maintenance, gas, all this stuff that goes into just simple transportation. Many people don't think about it in a fashion that says, hey, can I cut back on my expenses? And how much can I cut back on? They look at their transportation and say, well, that's a necessity, and I can't back off on my necessities like transportation. How else will I get to work? But then the necessity that they are looking at happens to be a really nice, expensive car. And they say to themselves, well, I need a nice car. I need a reliable vehicle. I can't have some piece of crap car that might break down on me. This is the reason why I am now stuck in this position in which that I have to buy this particular necessity out there that is literally preventing me from becoming a capitalist or a property owner. Like, this is where I think a lot of people make the mistake inside of their industriousness that they have acquired, their skills, their business, their job. If they get paid enough, then they will upgrade their vehicle, which literally prevents them from becoming that capitalist property owner. See, people ask me all the time. I have this 2001 S10. It has 165,000 miles on it. It's been beat up really bad. It's ugly. It runs slow, but it starts and drives and it does a great job for transportation. That's what I needed to do. It's cheap insurance. It's paid off. I paid $1,200 for it 3 years ago. Very little cost. But it gets me back and forth to work the same as somebody who is paying $1,000 a month to have their vehicle be the necessity that they drive back and forth to work. Well, this is the vehicle of my necessity, and I don't pay $1,000 a month to drive my vehicle. I use the extra money, if there is such a thing as extra money, the money beyond the money you already make, like there's such thing as extra money. But I use the money that I don't making payments with, I use it to buy stocks. I use it to buy crypto. I use it to work on my house, the asset that I am trying to acquire. See, I find that by not having a fancy vehicle or not having the payments, I have the ability to start moving myself into the property ownership, into the being the capitalist, into getting myself on the other side of the wedge. I know that if I had a new vehicle, which I could go out there and buy today. People make fun of this vehicle all the time on the YouTube channel. Look at some of the comments that people have. Your headliner's falling. Your vehicle's crap. Why don't you upgrade your vehicle? And I'm thinking to myself, if I upgrade the vehicle, then what am I going to use to try and buy cryptocurrencies? What am I going to use to try and buy stocks? What am I going to use to work on my house? I'm putting all my money into a vehicle so that I could get back and forth to work the same as this paid off vehicle will do. A lot of times people say it again, your vehicle will break down. Well, I've had this thing 3 years. You do have to do the maintenance on it. I had to replace the alternator. I have to change the oil. I had to do a few things to it occasionally to make sure that it runs back and forth down the road. But that's what you do. It's called maintaining your vehicle. And when you're driving a P.O.S. like I do, it's best to have a backup. And I do. I have a 99 Ford Explorer as well. The combination between the vehicles over the last 3 years has cost me less than $2,000. Maybe right at $2,000 for the two vehicles over the last 3 years. My vehicle expense is incredibly low, and I have no intentions on changing that. And so when I look out there in my town, which I do come from a fairly expensive town, Astoria is one of the 10 most expensive places to try and buy a house in this nation, considering the population that we have here. And so although I live in a fancy area, the vehicles here are really nice. My vehicles are not nice. But I think, yeah, I can afford a house here in this area, but I would not be able to afford one if I had a new car. So driving new cars is the reason why you are not getting yourself on the other side of the wedge. Don't get me wrong, if you can afford it, hey, you can afford it. Most people live paycheck to paycheck, but yet they can look out there in the driveway and they say, well, at least I have a nice car. And so I think to myself, I don't live paycheck to paycheck, but I can't look out my driveway and say, hey, I have a nice car. I could do just about whatever I want. I pay my bills on time. I could take a vacation. I could go out there and buy whatever I wanted to if I wanted to do it. And I think to myself, there's no way I would have anything inside of that position of life if I was buying a new vehicle. If I went out there and put that money down on the new Camaro like I really wanted to, then I would be making payments in high insurance and I would not be able to afford some of the things that I am doing in life. My boy gets to do whatever sporting event he wants. You want to, whatever is extracurricular activity that he wants, I will totally buy the lessons for. He wants to do weight training, you want to do soccer, you want to do whatever, you got it, kid, right? Because I'm not going to deny that ability for you to do that because I want to drive a nice car. Like that's not the position of life that I want to be in. I want to be in a position in life in which that anything that I want is accessible to me, including the new car. And this is what's funny about this feeling, is that once you have the ability to get those items, they're not nearly as important. It's only important when you don't have it or can't get it. See, the moment that you can acquire something, it's all of a sudden, it's like, well, that's not that important. Maybe I'll wait a month before I get it. In fact, why would I even want it when I have something that is totally working? The moment that you can't get it, that's when you want it. When you think to yourself, man, I have no way of acquiring this. That's when the level of misunderstanding of why it is that you are in the position you're in starts lending to excuses and reasons and self-justifications. Right? You look at your life and you say, well, maybe I shouldn't drink so much. Maybe I shouldn't be blowing that money at the concerts. Maybe I shouldn't be going out every weekend and partying with my buddies. Maybe I should take consideration of what it is that I'm doing after work so that I can pursue more excellence to acquire the things that I need, like being a property owner or capitalist, so that I can get on the other side of the wedge. So that the inequality that we are facing in our society nowadays doesn't impact me like it does everybody else out there who seems to be going into the luxurious spendings of buying fancy cars. It doesn't even have to be a fancy car. It could just be a newer car. Higher insurance payments, car payments, maintenance, gas, everything that goes into these vehicles is preventing you from being able to become the capitalist or property owner. The more people understand this, the better that they will be able to position themselves so that they can move on to the other side of the wedge as well, and then they don't have to blame the government. They don't have to blame corporations. They don't have to blame the bankers out there. They don't even have to blame themselves, because they understand that if they are moving into a luxurious position, they are denying themselves the ability to get on the other side of the wedge. See, really, when you understand this stuff, you realize that this is the Cantillon effect in your own personal life. The moment that you became industrious and you started getting new money in, what did you want to do with that new money? You want to buy nicer clothes. You want to buy a nicer apartment. You want to drive a nicer car. This is the move into luxuries that is going to deny you the ability to get onto the other side of the wedge, so that inequality doesn't affect you. Instead of keeping your expenses low, raising your savings account, moving into a position in which that you are acquiring assets, instead you want for a better way of life, a higher standard of living. The moment that you are not able to be as industrious to provide for that higher standard of living, you will start to diminish your standard of living, and the pain and misery will start to begin. And this is the reason why we are facing some of the things we are in this nation. We are not the producing, saving nation that we once were, that would give people the ability to have the house, to have the car, to have the retirement. It doesn't work like that anymore. We have to understand that us as an industrious individual who is gaining the skills, gaining the ability to do business, be able to profit, when we do that, we cannot find ourselves falling into luxuries, or else you will pay the consequences. And part of those falling into luxuries is having a nice chariot. You don't need that in your life. You can get away with a whole lot less in your way of transportation. And by having a lesser transportation, you will be able to increase and be on the other side of the wedge, to be more profitable, to be more secure, to be in that position in which that the American dream seems to be more attainable. But the car, you don't need it. You're literally driving your own inequality. Uneducated Economist, you let me know.